The laughter hit me first. Too loud, too intimate, too familiar. The kind of laugh that came from my wife only when she was completely at ease. The kind she used to save for me. Now, it spilled effortlessly from her lips, directed at the man whose name crowned the top of my company's letterhead. Michael Dalton, my boss. Except that night he wasn't my boss. Not really. I stood across the ballroom, a glass of bourbon trembling slightly in my hand as I watched him lean closer to her. His hand grazing the bare skin of her shoulder. The chandelier light caught the gold of her dress, the one I bought her for our anniversary just 3 weeks ago. She looked breathtaking, radiant even. Her eyes alive in a way I hadn't seen in months. My chest tightened. I wanted to storm over, to remind him she wasn't just another one of his toys. But I didn't. I smiled, raised my glass, and took another slow sip. Because what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that I owned everything he stood on. Every contract, every patent, every line of code that made his empire possible, it was mine. I built it, and I'd sold it to him under a shell company's name 2 years ago when I decided to leave his toxic orbit. So when my wife laughed again, leaning just a little too close, I stayed silent. But inside something fractured. Earlier that evening she'd said, "Please, Daniel, try not to look miserable. It's a work thing, not a funeral." I'd smiled, tightening my tie. "Depends who's dying." She didn't laugh. She hadn't laughed at much lately. On the drive there, she scrolled through her phone, barely speaking. I noticed her lipstick, a deeper red than usual, and the perfume she only wore when she wanted attention. It wasn't lost on me who she wanted it from. Michael had always been charming, magnetic in that slick, predatory way. The kind of man who made everyone feel seen. The kind of man who flirted with boundaries just to see if you'd notice. I'd watched him do it for years, to clients, assistants, even interns. Now it was my wife's turn. The music shifted to something slower. I watched as he offered her his hand. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled and took it. Something primal twisted inside me. The bourbon turned bitter in my mouth. The people around me blurred into indistinct shadows, their laughter dull against the rising roar in my head. He spun her gently under the chandelier, her hair catching the light. She looked free, unburdened, like she'd forgotten I existed. "Beautiful couple, aren't they?" One of the executives beside me murmured, chuckling. "Yeah," I said quietly. "They are." When the song ended, Michael whispered something in her ear, his hand resting low on her back. She blushed, actually blushed. Then, as if rehearsed, they walked toward the balcony, disappearing through the glass doors. My heartbeat quickened. I followed, slow and deliberate, keeping to the edges of the crowd until the cold night air hit me. They stood there, framed by moonlight, his body angled toward hers. I couldn't hear every word, but fragments reached me through the hum of the city below. "You deserve someone who understands you," he said. "Not someone who hides behind work." Her voice trembled. "Michael, don't." He touched her face. "You're too smart to play the dutiful wife forever." My vision swam. I gripped the railing just inside the doorway, grounding myself in the metal's chill. I should have confronted him right then, ripped the mask off both of them. But instead I stepped back. Because this wasn't about him anymore. It was about her, and me, and everything that had been rotting between us for months. When we got home, the silence was suffocating. She went straight to the bedroom, wordless. I followed a minute later. She was standing in front of the mirror, still in her gold dress, wiping off her lipstick with a tissue that was already stained red. "Did you enjoy yourself?" I asked. Her hand froze. "Don't start, Daniel. I'm just asking." She met my eyes in the mirror, and for a second I saw guilt flicker there. Then it hardened into defiance. "You didn't seem to care. You barely looked at me all night." "I looked," I said quietly. "I saw everything." The tissue fell from her hand. "Then why didn't you stop it?" I stepped closer. "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go." Her breath hitched. "You're sick. Maybe. But not blind." She turned to face me fully now, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. You don't understand. You left me alone in that marriage months ago. You stopped talking, stopped noticing. I let out a bitter laugh. So you decided to fill the silence with him? He listens, she whispered. He manipulates, I shot back. And you let him. She flinched but didn't deny it. For a long moment we just stood there, the space between us thick with everything we hadn't said. Then I took a deep breath. Do you know what's funny? Yes. He thinks he owns everything. The cars, the company, the power. But he doesn't. I do. She blinked, confused. What are you talking about? I smiled faintly. Every contract he's signed, every deal he's bragged about, it's all mine. I walked away from that empire and sold it back to him under another name. I own the man who thinks he's seducing my wife. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. You're lying. Check the records, I said softly. You'll see my signature everywhere, just not under my name. Silence stretched, thick and cold. Finally she whispered. So what now? You ruin him. I shook my head. No. I let him ruin himself. That's what men like him do. And me. Her voice cracked. I looked at her reflection in the mirror. The gold dress, the smeared lipstick, the tears she was trying to hide. You already did, I said. Then I walked out, leaving her with her reflection, and the weight of her own choices. The next morning the headlines broke. Dalton Holdings crumbles under hidden ownership revelation. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated. Because in the quiet that followed, all I could hear was her laughter at that party. Bright, alive, and no longer mine.